Spider-Man 2 got destroyed at the Game Awards, and the tears of PlayStation fanboys put Mr. Beast's African Wells to shame. But it wasn't a bad game, was it? In fact, it was pretty good and had a generally positive reception. So why didn't it win? Simple. It wasn't good enough. Now, before you all pick up the pitchforks and shivs, hear me out. PlayStation has simply been eons ahead of the competition when it comes to their first-party titles for quite a while now. When you look at games like Uncharted, Eternal, Demon's Souls, God of War, and of course Spider-Man, it becomes pretty clear that while they may have some shady industry practices here and there, the quality of product they deliver to you once you become a PlayStation owner is currently second to none. Nintendo have been milking the same old cows for over 2 decades, and Xbox is Xbox. If you own one for the titles, I pray for you every day. But the reality is that while Spider-Man 2 was a really good game, it wasn't a great one, and there were 3 main factors that heavily affected its loss. Number 1, the developers didn't take enough risks with this new entry. Let me explain point number 1. While Insomniac's new creation had improvements in every aspect, nothing was really groundbreaking. There were no massive changes, but rather noticeable quality of life improvements to gameplay and combat, like the ability to glide around the city, new powers, a better skill tree, etc. It doesn't have that magic that the original had, where we were all shocked and would look in awe at how good of a Spider-Man game they had made. The thought of a Spidey game with good web swinging was enough to make a grown man wet his trousers. They took a very safe approach this time around by deciding to improve upon a formula that has proven success without deviating too much from it. While that is financially a very sound decision, it doesn't help when you're competing against developers that are hungry for the recognition and for the chance to prove themselves in the industry. Good enough and safe just don't cut it. It seems even more of a missed opportunity when you think of the kind of budget they had for the game. Insomniac spent an insane sum of $315 million, while Baldur's Gate 3, during their 6-year development schedule, managed to become this year's Game of the Year by spending a third of that with a total budget of $100 million. Another point that shows us once again that shareholders and players have very different things in mind when it comes to making a great game. Number 2, gamers always love a good underdog. Reason number 2 ties into the hunger of these up-and-coming developers that may not have the pedigree big studios like Insomniac has. We all have a love-hate relationship with the AAA game makers, and when we see a smaller studio take it to the big dogs, we eat that stuff up. It's a glimmer of hope that one of these companies is going to be our golden goose that'll save us from the mountains upon mountains of corporate bullshit they make us go through every year with their half-ass releases, day one patches, and egregious microtransactions. Seeing people that seem closer to us, the players, than them, the industry, gets us excited, and that definitely plays a role with people's overall perception of the games being played. A more recent example of the community supporting the underdog was when CDPR made The Witcher 3. They had such a straightforward approach of get your money's worth, even in their DLCs, that we saw them as our knights in shining armor until they decided to come out of nowhere and fuck us sideways with Cyberpunk 2077. Insomniac sadly doesn't have the little guy factor going for them, and even though they haven't spread out cheeks in the same way most studios have, that just isn't an interesting enough plot for the audience, I'm afraid. Number 3, it didn't represent anything more than another Spider-Man game. Now, reason number 3 is probably the most complex one to explain. Spider-Man 2 is just another Spider-Man game, you know? It doesn't represent anything more than a good sequel to a great game. Not only was Baldur's Gate 3 the underdog, but the studio itself showed such a commitment to player experience that it resembled an industry that most of us haven't seen since the early 2000s. To put it into perspective, let's bust out the numbers. Spider-Man 2's campaign is around 15 hours long, right? And if you want to 100% it, you may be looking at around 35 hours of gameplay total. If the game was around $70, we'd be looking at a value of $2 per hour of entertainment. Baldur's Gate 3's main story was around 45 hours long, a whole 10 hours longer than a full Spider-Man 2 playthrough. with the average person probably taking 75 hours to finish the game, including some side quests. This would mean you'd be paying, give or take, 80 cents per hour of entertainment on PC or 93 cents per hour on console. Of course, we're not including the replayability factor, which, with Baldur's Gate 3's whopping 174 hours of cinematics, we'd be looking at a value of 34 cents or 40 cents per hour, respectively, in just story scenes. Add that value to no microtransactions, no pre-order deals, as well as simply unrelenting player support post-launch, including free content, and Baldur's Gate 3 managed to represent the voice of many players who have been yearning for the single-player experiences of old. Needless to say, Spider-Man 2 didn't stand a chance, and they were doomed from the moment they chose money over creativity. I mean, just think about it. We're talking about a tactical, turn-based D&D RPG winning against a fast-paced action game in the Spider-Man universe. Hell, the studios owned by PlayStation had 3 Game of the Year awards in a row from 2018 to 2020. The only way the niche crowd from a somewhat known but still pretty green studio like Larian could win against such a behemoth was going to be through jaw-dropping moves, like adding things we hadn't seen before, or simply having an attitude towards the product that made the community rejoice as a whole. It's not that Insomniac couldn't make a game that could blow our minds. Insomniac isn't struggling. They have an immensely popular IP in their hands, and they really had all the money in the world to make this an absolute monster of a game. They just didn't. A real shame, because at the end of the day, video games are an art form, and while Spider-Man 2 was a good game by most standards, being stripped of creativity and freedom with a rather safe game direction for the sake of profit will always limit the potential any team of devs can reach for their project. In all honesty, those are the companies that can afford to try new things and set new boundaries, so seeing them actively avoid doing so is disappointing to say the least. On the subject of Game of the Year though, if you're into knowing more about what made Baldur's Gate 3 this year's winner, go ahead and check this video out. Anyway, those are my thoughts on why Spider-Man 2 got destroyed in the Game Awards. What did you guys think? Did you agree with the results of the Game Awards, or do you think Spider-Man 2 was robbed for some reason? Or hell, if you didn't like any of those two options, which game would you have picked instead? Leave all those answers in the comment section below. If you like what you saw, go ahead and leave a like so more people can see the video and I can slowly crawl my way out of poverty. Thanks. Bye!